from stuff.co.nz, Michelle Duff has written a piece that played in the weekend, that was in the online, I was going to say in the paper, but online over the weekend, why escalating misogynistic abuse of Jacinda Ardern is a national security issue. We didn't talk about this yesterday because me and George felt like maybe we weren't the best people to offer the solo perspective on this.
Yes.
But we are lucky enough to have Michelle with us. Michelle Duff joins us. Good morning to you.
Kia ora, how are you going?
Yeah, bloody marvelous. Actually, we're doing really good.
Thanks for having me on.
No, look, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for being on. I guess this is I find it an interesting conversation, and as people who watch this will know, and how George often rolls his eyes when I say this, but one of the things I like to do is kind of go, not that this is a negative about an article, but beyond the headline and beyond the content, and find out more about how that impacts and reacts and works in society as well. And I'm really keen to talk about this idea based on your article, which we're looking at right there, why escalating misogynistic abuse of Jacinda is a national security issue. But I think the right and appropriate thing to do, and the thing I want to do first of all, is just to kind of give you the floor, if you want to share your perspective and your opinion based around your article around why you think this or why this is the case, and we'll go from there. So the floor is yours, Michelle.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, luckily I came prepared with my weeks of reporting into this. Look, so this is something that has been noted by everyone who's working in the disinformation space. And in fact, you don't have to be working in the disinformation space to notice that there has definitely been an increase in visible, sexist and misogynistic targeting of the Prime Minister over time. So the Disinformation Project, who work out of Te Punaha Matatini, have tracked this since August. They say this has risen exponentially across the sort of toxic spaces that they monitor, like Telegram and some of those chat spaces, but also mainstream social media like, Twitter and Facebook and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's an issue, and the problem that we're now seeing that the SIS have is that there is so much of it, and it's so vitriolic that they're not entirely certain if anyone's mobilizing to act or if it's just general kind of hideous speech.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to me, it's just so frustrating, and it feels like if it's linked to August, that's when things sort of went more pear-shaped with our COVID response. I mean, and the fact that I don't think anybody's dropped the ball per se, but these variants came along that could evade the public health measures, and so we've all got COVID fatigue, including the Prime Minister. But then they've turned that around to the perceived gatekeepers, who is her, and blamed her for everything. Is that the sort of thing that you picked up through that, do you think?
Yeah, definitely the health measures that were put into place for COVID had a massive effect on that sort of disinformation spiking in the way that it did. And, for those people who create this content, having the occupation of Parliament and that kind of thing was, that was something that they enjoyed because they consider themselves to be reporters, and they're creating content, and it's exploding all over these different channels. And, so certainly that had an impact, but the gender disinformation as well, that is something that we have, that is a real concern. And that's something that we haven't really seen in this way and the extent of it until now.
Yeah. And it's always been there, like the way that Helen Clark was talked about, and just the way that the women, and Judith Collins, I'm left as hell, but I will not engage in denigrating women because of their appearance. The thing that worries me is that, I was looking at all the stories of the, incels. If people don't know what that is, it's an involuntary celibate, which is just a notion that makes me want to punch people, which isn't very passive. But, you know, like that guy in Toronto who used his van to kill 10 people and said it's because I'm an involuntary celibate. And there's another man, oh, look, you know, George Sidini killed 3 people in an exercise class and his manifesto said he hated women. Elliot Rodger killed 6 people because he had a misogynic manifesto. Anders Breivik, Brenton Tarrant. You know, these are all people that Joe Cox, that MP in the UK, who got shot by somebody with misogyny at their base. And this is where it can escalate to. And that's the thing that's so troubling to me. And it's just so cavalier, and things like a pretty communist and just a girl in a skirt on a power trip. That one just made me again want to rip things up. So it just makes me so angry. But then you're the angry woman who's ranting and, oh, you should calm down and all that sort of stuff. And that drives me crazy. Anyway, I'm just saying things, Michelle. Respond.
And I'm nodding along with you, Penny. So yes, look, I think the thing actually that I think can be quite difficult for people to understand, you know, a lot of people sort of come along with, oh, but, you know, people called Jonky donkey, or, you know, but women are doing it too. So, you know, as if they're sort of like, what about, you know, what about this thing happening? What about that thing happening? And I think what's a really important thing to establish is that, you know, yes, of course, politicians do get this, you know, these kinds of disrespectful statements made about them, and are open to abuse and that kind of thing. But no one hated Donald Trump because he was a man. You know, no one attacked John Key because he was a man. You know, there is a world of difference between a pretty communist in a skirt, you know, to anything that's thrown in a male politician. And this is why it's really important to understand what misogyny is. Okay. Misogyny is not, I mean, it is hatred of women. Yes. But we need to understand it more than that. It is the attempt to punish and control women for transgressing female roles and not being good women. Right. And so, you know, we can imagine that a good woman is someone who, I don't know, is at home in the kitchen, you know, is like a sexual object. That you know, these things are designed to remind women that there is a place for them, and that place is not in public life. And so all of this misogynistic abuse, you know, from someone like what we saw with the Jacinda Ardern's face being superimposed onto a sex worker's body on Facebook last week, you know, something like that, where people can sort of just watch it and laugh and, like, you know, put a like emoji next to it or share it with their friends. You know, that is damaging in its own right. And it's, yes, like you say, Penny, like the incel subculture and the fact that misogyny is, in all of these toxic and extremist ideologies, misogyny has a part in a lot of those. And so that is dangerous, but on its own, it's dangerous because it belittles women and it prevents them from wanting to be in public.
Well, that's it. Like and it goes to all levels too, like the woman in Christchurch who did such a great job. I'm sorry, you will know her name. What is her name?
Sarah Templeton.
Thank you very much. Also, my friend is the deputy mayor of Nelson, you know, Judine Edgar, and she gets a whole lot of horrid stuff. It is at all levels. And it will discourage women from going into politics, which is the last thing that we need, because we need representation of women so that women will be reflected in legislations, etc. Like the ones we were talking about, Louisa Wall yesterday, but she's gotten such great stuff through, like those exclusion zones around abortion clinics and period poverty. And what really gets me, actually, and I've been doing a menopause podcast, and this has really come to the fore for me, that it's all based around the fact that we are the beings with our reproductive system that create life. And every aspect of that has been used against us, and we've had to fight against it. So, like, first of all, it was pregnancy. You can't work if you're pregnant. You can't go out looking pregnant. It's disgusting. Periods, you have to have shame around periods. And now it's just happening with menopause, that there's a bit of revolution with breaking down the barriers, you know. And traditionally when menopause happens, women disappear because they're no longer fuckable anymore. So we don't want to see them in the public eye. And it drives me crazy that it's the very process that populates the planet that is then used against us. So anyway, that's something I've been thinking of lately as well.
Hey, can I jump in and ask some questions as well?
Yes.
No, you may not, Pat.
Is it okay?
This is the Penny. This is the Penny and Michelle show. I'm not sure if you're aware of that.
Me and George, are we allowed to speak in this conversation? Are we okay?
We will allow it, but we might mute you.
Okay, fine. I think we will all agree it's okay to. When I say it's okay, I mean it's acceptable in society to kind of be vitriolic against politicians. You know,
I don't
you hate
think it
John
should
Key.
be.
Yeah, I'm not. No, that's not what I'm saying, Peter. I'm not saying we should or we shouldn't, but I think that we're allowed to have opinions and you know, even if they're vile and abhorrent opinions against politicians. Can I just say, Michelle, before I go into this thing, you've explained a huge part of it for me already that I was looking for an answer for, which is hatred because they are women versus John Key was never hated because he was a man.
Yeah.
But John Key was hated by some people. So what I'm wondering as well is how do, it sounds like a weird question, but how do we hate Jacinda Ardern without being misogynists? And I'm not saying I want to hate Jacinda Ardern or any, but a female public figure. If we accept that, like, is any hatred of a female public figure therefore misogyny, or does it need to be specifically because you're hating them because they're a female? Because there'll be some people, I don't know whether it's a little percentage or a big percentage, who have negative feelings around female public figures that won't be because they're a woman. It'll be for other reasons. So how do we transverse that? Because I guess I'm also wondering is how do we know what is the misogyny against a female public figure in particular and what isn't?
I think it's just if anything, if she's being attacked for anything that's to do with her gender and not a policy, then that is likely to be sexist or misogynistic.
Yeah. And there's also stuff around just assuming someone, like as a female comedian, I know that I would walk onto the stage and a section of the audience, especially when I first started 20 years ago, would be like, oh God. So you have to prove that you're first of all not shit before they can think that you're good. Whereas a man would walk on and then just be good and they'd be like, hooray. But first of all, it'd be like, oh, women aren't funny. And that just, which is thankfully changing. But that's, I think, the same sort of thing. You know, first of all, they have to prove they're worthy of that title. So there's this inherent bias before they've even opened their mouths as well.
Okay. Let me just expand on this because I just want to finish the thought. So, and look, Richard, who is watching us right now, kind of echoes what you're saying, Michelle. Target the issues, right? Target the issues. So I'm to ask the question sort of again. There will be many people who target their criticism and quote unquote hatred of male public figures not targeting the issues. If targeting female public figures, if it's not an issues part, steeps in, you know, misogyny and sexism, what is it when they target male figures and it's not based in the issues?
To be honest, I don't care. Like, I'm honestly getting to the point where if I need to explain what misogyny is to you, you know, then why are we even having this conversation? You know, like, it's, you know, the same word, Jacinda Ardern during the COVID response, right? She gives a speech which, you know, people have analyzed her speeches and they, you know, that it's a great kind of crisis communication. She's clear, she's calm, she's explaining it so that a 12-year-old could understand. Men listen to it and think she's being patronizing. You know, if the same words came out of a man's mouth, it wouldn't be the same. It wouldn't be the same response. You know, it's the playing field is not level, and like Penny says, with being you know, like a female comedian, and immediately you have to prove that you're funny. It's, you know, and just trying to compare and contrast and saying, oh, if a man experiences this, then what's that? You know, it's
yeah.
And I feel like it's just like deflecting. It's trying to derail the conversation. And yeah, you can always take it to the nth degree, but that's not what we're talking about here.
Yeah, it's like not all men. You know, they did that survey when they asked 100 men, what they most feared from in women. It was to be laughed at, and what women feared from men was to be killed. And that's it. If there was a long litany of stories of women who couldn't get sex that turned around and killed 10 people with a van, then okay. But there isn't any of those. The amount of femicide at the hands of disenfranchised men because they think feminism has hurt them, which is ludicrous. And it's like, you know, when you experience privilege, equality feels like oppression. The first time I heard that, I was like, oh my God, that's so true. And then to turn that around to actually kill women with, and that's where it ends up. So yeah, I'm a bit like, who gives a shit?
The distinction is that the discourse and the gendered focused attacks reinforce a power imbalance, right? They reinforce the patriarchy. I think that's the key key distinction. Michelle, I was wondering, Penny brought up some of the sort of the horrific attacks that have sort of happened. I was wondering about the national security side of things from your article. What sort of things have we seen come up? I noticed someone was charged for threatening to kill Jacinda Ardern. What sort of, I guess, manifestations have we seen?
So yes, Richard Civil was last week arrested for threatening to kill Jacinda Ardern. I think that's the first sort of quite public arrest that we've had. So there, you know, the SAS. I talked to the head of New Zealand's the Director General of the SAS, Rebecca Kitteridge, last week for this story as well. So the SAS are concentrating on trying to find people who are mobilizing to carry out a terrorist attack. So they're finding it difficult at the moment because of the sheer amount of this sort of violent and misogynistic rhetoric across, you know, particularly in Telegram and those kind of spaces. They're finding it actually quite difficult to discern who could be, you know, likely to act. So they're actually going to put out some public sort of indicators in the next couple of months where people can sort of tell them if they've noticed any differences in people around them. And so that's like an SAS kind of terrorist attack sort of level. And then we have, you know, the police and sort of NetSafe and Internal Affairs a little bit, who are sort of responsible for a local response, which I wouldn't say appears to be sort of overly coordinated, but yeah, they sort of work on those local level threats.
Do you think they're taking it seriously enough?
I mean, I think I didn't actually get a response from police on exactly, you know, what is the threat level that there has to be for someone to be arrested. And is there any sort of centralized unit that's looking at this full time from, you know, so I don't actually have an answer to that.
Right.
And that'll be something that I'll be continually looking at in this reporting.
Yeah. And just things like the culture within the police itself. Like, you know, what is the culture of misogyny within the echelons of police, which I think has come under scrutiny before. And Alison Moore has obviously been doing great work in the Me Too space around all of the different aspects. And not just, there is, she's dealt with some, obviously, sexual assault things around male victims and things as well. But yeah, I mean, that's at the very core, isn't it? It's like the whole level of society and how do people look at women's involvement in every level of business, you know, etc. So
yeah, because it was like 2 decades of Islamophobia and the war on terror that totally created a blind spot in terms of intelligence gathering around anti-Islam rhetoric and how that manifested eventually in the Christchurch shootings. So yeah, it's scary to think that there would be these blind spots. I guess there's sort of a silver lining in that it's our Prime Minister under threat, and so surely that would be taken seriously. But I guess it's the more sort of low profile, you know, the people who aren't the Prime Minister that is scary.
God,
just before I go, can I just say
we're just about to run out short of time, but I think this would be probably an appropriate time to tie that back into the national security threat that the misogyny is as well, based around what you're talking about, the threat to the Prime Minister. I mean, there was plenty more to talk about, but there's a time limit, and we've got someone else coming up at 1:30. But if you're able to tie that back into the national security, which is the kind of premise of the article, that would be good to understand as well.
Yeah, I think actually what I really want to say is that we all have a responsibility to stop this. You know, yes, the SAS need to be monitoring this, and so do the police. But, you know, we all live in the same society, and this is a sliding scale. You know, this is only possible because there is a base level of misogyny that exists.
Yep.
So, you know, laughing at a joke, you know, it's like laughing at a rape joke, or, you know, on a really small scale, like calling Jacinda Ardern Cindy, which is an attempt to infantilize, diminish her, treat her like she's a little doll. You know, those are things that we can all actually call out when we see them. And, you know, the thing is, we don't want this, you know, it has become normalized And it's not normal, and it shouldn't be normal. So we all have a responsibility, I think, to try and stop that from, going any further.
Can I just say though as well?
That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, sure. Can I just add though as well? I mean, I don't disagree with what you're saying about us stopping it, but if people want and need to understand it a bit further, the response of "I don't really care" is not going to necessarily help bring those people to a full understanding of what they're trying to ask questions about either. I mean, like there was other questions that I wanted to talk to you about, but I said we've run short on time, and maybe in some situations the questions are sort of loaded and they're really just trying to put a perspective through. But then there are other people who want to understand further and enable positions to be put out there so other people can understand more clearly who maybe aren't quite on the same page as everybody else is right now. And the response of, well, I don't actually care anymore is not helpful to those people who we want to bring on board to go, we need to stop this and understand why Cindy is not okay, for example. And especially when it was Auntie Helen and she seemed to be okay with that. And it's a learning process for everyone to get to the point. And I can see the face, Penny, that you really want to jump in on this, which you're welcome to. But everyone's at different places in this journey and everyone has to understand differently. And
I just think you're talking about, they won't listen. They don't care. They're the ones who've gone that far already. So to want to appeal to them and to describe, if somebody's calling you that.
But I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about, for example, why it's not okay. But what was that?
Don't you know that in yourself, that calling her that is diminutive?
I think it's diminutive because she has said she doesn't like the word, she doesn't like being called Cindy. So she stated that publicly. So I think it is. I think that giving nicknames to public figures, unless they state like she has, is neither here nor there for a lot of situations. I mean, I lost my train of thought there, but like I'm genuinely want to understand why when you've got a prime minister who within 12 months of becoming prime minister voiced that having children was more important than the prime ministership in a public conversation, who has also said it's okay to ask me the question, why asking her the question is sexist? Because she said it's okay to ask her the question. She stated before she was a prime minister that having children was more important than the prime ministership in a public setting. It would be a natural conclusion to then say to that person, now that you are prime minister, what about children? Now, I genuinely want to ask that question, but if the response is going to be, I don't really care about that, this is where we're at. I get that, and that's fine, but it means we can't have a conversation where I can actually learn more from a genuine place.
Just to clarify, I wasn't saying that I don't care about that. I was just finding it can just be quite maddening saying this over and over again and having,
I get that.
And having the question sort of being, but what about this? But what about that? If you really want to understand what women experience on a daily basis, the microaggressions that we have to live with, and the way that we have to prove ourselves in a way that men don't, then I would suggest doing some reading and maybe following some feminists on Twitter and Facebook, or, I can try and educate you, but I probably can't do that in this 20-minute slot. So, I'll leave you with Penny, I think, because I feel like she's probably the best person to do that.